You don't belong here. Sir, this seat is for our real VIPs. Move, now. Samantha Reed, the Horizon Airlines flight attendant, spat the words with a venom that stunned the first-class cabin at Miami International Airport's Gate C9. Her eyes, cold and unyielding, locked onto Ethan Carter, a black man seated calmly in 3A, as if his presence in the plush leather seat was an insult to the airline's elite standards. Behind her, Margaret Hayes, a white woman in a tailored Chanel suit, tapped her manicured nails impatiently, muttering, "That's my seat. Always has been." The words hit Ethan like a slap, but he didn't flinch. He'd heard versions of this before, too many times. Yet, in this moment, on a flight bound for San Francisco, the audacity of Samantha's demand ignited something deeper than anger. It was resolve. Before we dive into the story, I want to know where you're watching from. Have you ever faced a moment where you were judged before you could even speak? Drop your thoughts below. Hit that follow button if you stand for justice. And let's build a fairer world together. This is about to get real. Ethan Carter, 41, wasn't just any passenger. He was the CEO of Novatech Solutions, a $4 billion AI powerhouse revolutionizing how companies tackle bias in customer service. With a 30% stake in Horizon Airlines, the largest single shareholding, he held more power over the airline than its own board. Today, he was headed to the Global AI and Ethics Summit in San Francisco to unveil a $700 million platform designed to root out systemic discrimination. The irony wasn't lost on him as Samantha's words echoed, her tone dripping with the same prejudice his tech fought to dismantle. The first-class cabin, a haven of heated towels and champagne flutes, fell silent. Passengers shifted in their seats, some pulling out phones to record, others exchanging uneasy glances. Ethan's presence, tailored Navy suit, Patek Philippe watch glinting under the cabin lights, should have screamed success. But to Samantha, and to Margaret standing smugly in the aisle, he was an anomaly, a black man who dared occupy a space they deemed exclusive. Ethan's mind flashed to his childhood in Oakland, California. At 12, he'd scavenged a broken computer from a thrift shop, teaching himself to code while his single mother worked double shifts. By 16, he'd lost his father to a senseless act of violence, standing at his grave with a vow to make the world see people as human first. That promise fueled 2 decades of grinding, building Novatech from a cramped apartment, coding 18 hours a day, surviving rejections from venture capitalists who couldn't see past his skin. Now, at the pinnacle of success, he was still fighting the same battle. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Ethan said, his voice steady, pulling out his boarding pass and platinum membership card. "This is my assigned seat. 3A. I'm a platinum member." He held the documents up, his gaze locking with Samantha's, daring her to double down. Samantha's smile tightened, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before it hardened again. "I understand, sir," she said, her politeness a thin veil over condescension. "But this seat is reserved for our preferred platinum members, like Ms. Hayes, who flies with us regularly." She gestured to Margaret, whose lips curled into a satisfied smirk. "We need you to move to another section." The implication was clear. Ethan's status didn't matter. His money, his achievements, his very existence in first class was less valid than Margaret's entitlement. Passengers nearby stirred, a young Latina woman across the aisle discreetly angling her phone to capture the exchange. Ethan felt the weight of their eyes, the cabin a microcosm of a world that too often judged him before knowing him. Margaret stepped closer, her voice carrying just enough to be heard. "I have a critical meeting in San Francisco," she said, checking her watch dramatically. "I always sit in 3A. This is ridiculous." Her words weren't just a complaint. They were a claim, a declaration that this space belonged to her kind, not Ethan's. Samantha nodded, emboldened. "Sir, we can make this easy," she said, leaning in slightly, her tone now edged with a threat. "Move to another seat, or we'll have to involve security." Ethan's jaw tightened, but his composure held. He'd faced worse. Boardrooms where his ideas were dismissed, investors who questioned his fit, even a tech conference where a white exec took credit for his algorithm. Each time, he'd turned pain into power. But today, the stakes felt bigger. This wasn't just about him. It was about every person who'd been told they didn't belong, whose dignity was trampled for the comfort of others. "I selected this seat for the legroom," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "I need to work during the flight. I'm not moving." 6 simple words, delivered without malice. But they landed like a gauntlet thrown. Samantha's face flushed, her eyes darting to Nathan Brooks, the customer service manager, who'd been watching from the galley. Nathan, a former Marine with a rigid posture and a buzz cut, strode over, his presence commanding attention. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone implying Ethan was the issue, not the airline's bias. "No problem," Ethan replied, holding up his boarding pass again. "Just a misunderstanding. This is my seat." "Confirmed." Nathan's eyes narrowed, assessing Ethan as if he were a trespasser. "Sir," he said, his voice low but laced with authority, "we accommodate our VIPs based on their preferences. Ms. Hayes is a valued customer. You'd be more comfortable in another section." The word comfortable was a lie, a coded way of saying Ethan's presence disrupted their order. Ethan's heart pounded, not with fear but with clarity. He knew this moment was pivotal. Horizon Airlines wasn't just any carrier. It was one he partially owned, one that was courting a $75 million contract with Novatech to overhaul its outdated booking systems. They had no idea who they were challenging before Ethan could respond. Captain Daniel Foster emerged from the cockpit, his weathered face set in a professional mask. "What's the holdup?" he asked, glancing at Samantha and Nathan. Samantha quickly briefed him, framing Ethan as uncooperative. Daniel sighed, his exhaustion evident, and turned to Ethan. "Sir, my crew has the authority to reassign seats for passenger comfort. Let's resolve this quickly." Ethan's eyes met Daniel's, searching for a flicker of fairness. He found none. "Captain," he said, his voice steady, "I'm in my assigned seat with a valid ticket. There's no policy requiring me to move for another passenger's preference." Nathan's patience snapped. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said, his voice rising just enough to draw more attention. "Move, or we call security. Your choice." The cabin was now a stage, every passenger a witness. Ethan reached for his phone, opening the camera app with deliberate calm. "I'm documenting this," he said, his voice clear. "For the record, I'm being asked to leave my seat because another passenger wants it." Samantha's face paled, but Nathan smirked, undeterred. "Go ahead, record," he said. "It won't change anything." What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that a passenger's phone had already captured Margaret slipping $300 to Samantha, a bribe to ensure her usual seat. That video, now uploading to social media, would soon reach 10 million views, sparking a firestorm that would cost Horizon $5 billion in market value. Ethan's mind raced, not with panic, but with strategy. He thought of his mother, who'd worked nights to keep their lights on, telling him, "Never let them dim your shine." He thought of the countless others who'd faced this same humiliation without his resources. As security officers approached, their heavy footsteps echoing, Ethan knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The cabin was a crucible of tension so thick it seemed to mute the hum of the plane's systems idling outside. Passengers, some clutching phones to record, Others frozen in their plush seats, watched as Ethan, still seated in 3A, held his ground. Samantha Reed's venomous command, "You don't belong here," lingered in the air, sharpened by Margaret Hayes's smug nod, Nathan Brooks's rigid glare, and Captain Daniel Foster's reluctant compliance. Ethan's phone, propped discreetly on his tablet, captured every word, every glance. But the footage wasn't his only weapon. As the CEO of Novatech Solutions, with a controlling stake in Horizon, he held a power these crew members couldn't fathom. This wasn't just about a seating dispute. It was a betrayal of the values he'd built his life around. Ethan's eyes met the approaching security officers, two men in crisp Navy uniforms, their faces set in practiced neutrality. He recognized the older one, Officer Miguel Alvarez, from a brief encounter earlier when Ethan had helped an elderly woman with her luggage at check-in. Miguel's gaze flickered with unease, as if sensing the situation was off. "Sir," Miguel said, his voice low, "we've been asked to escort you off the aircraft." Ethan nodded once, his composure unshaken. "I understand," he said, his tone calm but deliberate. "But I'd like to clarify why. I'm in my assigned seat, 3A, with a valid boarding pass and platinum status. Can you tell me what policy I'm violating?" The question hung heavy, exposing the flimsy pretext of his removal. Miguel hesitated, glancing at his partner, who shrugged subtly. Nathan Brooks stepped forward, his voice cutting through. "You're causing a disturbance," he said. His military cadence clipped. "That's reason enough. Let's go." Ethan's jaw tightened, but his eyes stayed steady. He thought of his father, gunned down in Oakland when Ethan was 16, and the promise he'd made at his grave to make the world see people as human first. That vow had carried him through Stanford, through rejections from investors who couldn't see past his skin, through nights coding in a freezing apartment to build Novatech. Now, facing the same prejudice he'd fought his whole life, Ethan felt a fire ignite, not anger, but purpose. "I'm not causing a disturbance," Ethan said, his voice clear, each word measured for the recording. "I'm being asked to move because another passenger prefers my seat. That's the truth. And it's being documented." He gestured to his phone, then to the Latina woman across the aisle, whose camera was still rolling. Her eyes met his, a silent nod of solidarity. Samantha's face flushed, her hands trembling slightly as she glanced at Margaret, who stood in the aisle, her Chanel bag clutched like a shield. "This is absurd," Margaret huffed, loud enough for the cabin to hear. "I have a board meeting in San Francisco. I need that seat." Her entitlement was a performance, but it was the $300 she'd slipped to Samantha, caught on video, that would soon unravel everything. Captain Daniel Foster, his weathered face etched with fatigue, stepped closer. "Sir," he said, his tone softer but firm, "my crew's decisions are final for passenger comfort. Please comply, or we'll have no choice." His words carried the weight of a man who'd navigated storms but avoided moral ones, and Ethan saw it. A flicker of doubt in Daniel's eyes, quickly buried. Ethan's heart pounded, not with fear, but with clarity. He thought of his mother, who'd worked double shifts to keep their Oakland home, telling him, "They'll try to break you, but you bend, never break." He thought of the countless others, Black, Latino, Muslim, who'd faced this same indignity without a platform. This wasn't just his fight, it was theirs. "I respect your position, Captain," Ethan said, standing now, his 6-foot frame commanding the space. "But I'm not moving unless you can show me a policy that justifies this. Otherwise, you're removing me for refusing to be discriminated against." Nathan's smirk faded, replaced by a scowl. "You're making this ugly," he said, signaling to Miguel. "Take him out." Miguel hesitated, his hand hovering near his radio. "Sir," he said to Ethan, almost pleading, "let's avoid escalation." Ethan saw the conflict in Miguel's eyes. A Latino man likely familiar with bias himself, caught in a system that demanded compliance. "I'm not escalating," Ethan replied, his voice steady. "I'm standing up." The cabin was now a stage, every passenger a witness. A white businessman in 2C shook his head, muttering, "Just move, man." But the Latina woman, her phone steady, whispered, "Keep going." Her courage bolstered Ethan's. He gathered his briefcase, tablet, and coat, moving with deliberate dignity as Miguel and his partner flanked him, as Ethan stepped into the aisle. Margaret slid into 3A, her triumph unmistakable. "Finally," she said, accepting a champagne flute from Samantha, who avoided Ethan's gaze. But the passenger's video, now uploaded, captured a second damning moment, Margaret slipping another $200 to Nathan, whispering, "Standards matter," in the terminal. The chaos of Gate C9 faded behind the glass doors. Ethan's phone buzzed. Olivia Grant, his COO and best friend from Stanford. "Ethan, what happened?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. He recounted the incident, his tone calm but resolute. "They don't know who I am. Live, but they will." Olivia, a Jamaican immigrant's daughter who'd fought her own battles in tech, didn't miss a beat. "Plan Apex?" she asked, referencing their strategy for systemic bias, legal, PR, and financial leverage to force change. "Plan Apex," Ethan confirmed. "Call the legal team. Get PR ready. This isn't just about me." He paced the terminal, his mind racing. Horizon wasn't just any airline. It was one he'd invested in, one chasing a $75 million contract with Novatech to modernize its systems. They'd humiliated the wrong man. Ethan's call to his general counsel was brief. "Draft a shareholder demand letter, cite discrimination and breach of fiduciary duty. We're calling an emergency board meeting." As he spoke, a young black woman approached, her carry-on trailing behind. "Mr. Carter?" she said, hesitant. "I was in 4B. I recorded everything, the bribe, the threats, all of it." She showed him her phone, the footage crystal clear. Ethan's eyes softened. "Thank you," he said, exchanging contacts. "This will matter." The video was already spreading, hashtags like #HorizonBias gaining traction. Ethan's PR team confirmed it had hit 500,000 views in minutes. He thought of his father's words. "Justice isn't given. It's taken." This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability, for the passengers who'd never get an apology, for the employees trapped in a toxic culture, for a world that needed to change. Back at Gate C9, Samantha and Nathan exchanged relieved glances. Unaware of the storm brewing, Daniel Foster returned to the cockpit, his unease buried under routine. Margaret sipped her champagne, oblivious to the $5 billion market value Horizon would soon lose. Ethan stood by a terminal window, watching the plane taxi away. His phone buzzed again. Olivia. "Legal's ready. PR's drafting a statement. Board meeting set for tomorrow. You sure about this?" "Never been surer," Ethan said, his voice low but fierce. Plan Apex was in motion, and Horizon was about to learn the cost of crossing Ethan Carter. The terminal at Miami International Airport's Gate C9 buzzed with the chaos of a brewing scandal. Passengers, some still reeling from the scene in the first-class cabin, typed furiously on their phones, sharing clips of Ethan's removal. The video, captured by the young woman in 4B, had exploded online, racking up 10 million views in just hours. Hashtags like #HorizonBias and #JusticeForEthan trended globally, turning a single seating dispute into a firestorm. Ethan, now in a private lounge overlooking the tarmac, stood with a quiet intensity, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the storm he'd unleashed. As CEO of Novatech Solutions and Horizon's largest shareholder, he wasn't just fighting for himself, he was dismantling a system that had humiliated countless others. Ethan's phone vibrated relentlessly. Texts from Olivia Grant, his COO, updates from his PR team, and alerts from news outlets scrambling for comment. He ignored them, his eyes fixed on a CNN ticker flashing across a lounge TV. Horizon Airline stock slides 20% amid discrimination allegations. The $5 billion hit to market value was just the start. Ethan's mind was already 3 steps ahead. Mapping out Plan Apex, a calculated blend of legal pressure, media exposure, and shareholder power to force Horizon to confront its toxic culture. In Dallas, at Horizon's sleek headquarters, CEO Charles Bennett sat in his corner office, his face ashen as he watched the viral video on loop. The footage was damning. Samantha Reed's icy demand for Ethan to move, Margaret Hayes slipping cash to Nathan Brooks, Captain Daniel Foster's weak justification. Charles's team huddled around a conference table, their voices a cacophony of panic. "How did we not know who he was?" his CFO muttered, scrolling through Novatech's profile. "He's not just a passenger, he's our biggest investor." Charles rubbed his temples, the weight of his legacy crumbling. He'd inherited Horizon from his father, a titan of aviation, but his tenure had been marked by cost-cutting and denial of systemic issues. Diversity complaints? PR noise, he'd called them. Now. That noise was a roar, and the $75 million contract Novatech was considering, a lifeline for Horizon's outdated systems, was slipping away. "Get me Ethan Carter on the line," Charles barked, his voice cracking, "and find out who authorized this mess." Back at MIA, Ethan paced the lounge, his legal team joining via video call. Olivia, her sharp eyes betraying a mix of fury and focus, laid out the strategy. "The shareholder letter's drafted," she said, her Jamaican accent clipped with urgency. "We're citing breach of fiduciary duty and reputational damage. The board can't ignore this." Ethan nodded, his thoughts drifting to his Oakland roots, nights coding to escape poverty, his mother's voice urging him to stand tall. This fight was bigger than him. It was for the black woman searched randomly at TSA. The Latino man bumped from flights, the Muslim family profiled. The lounge door opened, and the young woman from 4B, Mia Torres, approached, her face resolute. "Mr. Carter," she said, clutching her phone. "I've sent you the full video. It's unedited. Every second of what they did." Ethan's expression softened. Mia, a 25-year-old law student, had followed him off the plane, unable to stay silent. "I've been through this too," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Not first class, but, you know, they make you feel invisible." Ethan met her gaze, seeing his younger self in her defiance. "You're not invisible," he said. "Thank you. Mia, this will change things." Her video was the spark, but social media was the gasoline. Clips of Samantha's condescension, Nathan's threats, and Margaret's bribes spread like wildfire. Celebrities amplified the story, and news anchors dissected it. A black flight attendant, recently fired from Horizon, posted her own account. "They trained us to prioritize certain passengers. I quit when I couldn't take it anymore." Passengers at Gate C9 began sharing their stories. A Latino businessman denied upgrades. An Asian woman interrogated over her carry-on. The terminal became a chorus of voices, each one fueling the reckoning. In the first-class cabin, now taxiing to the runway, Samantha Reed served champagne with shaking hands. Her earlier confidence shattered. She'd seen the video trending on her phone, her face plastered across X with captions like, "Airline Karen's accomplice." As a single mother, she'd justified bending rules for tips to pay for her daughter Lily's school. Now. Guilt gnawed at her, the memory of Ethan's steady gaze haunting. Nathan Brooks, in the galley, scrolled through comments calling him a racist bully, his military pride cracking under the weight of public shame. He'd believed he was upholding order, but the video showed a different truth. Captain Daniel Foster, back in the cockpit, gripped the controls tighter than necessary. At 55, he'd prided himself on a spotless career, but today's inaction gnawed at him. He'd trusted his crew, avoiding conflict to keep the peace. Now, he wondered if peace had come at the cost of his integrity. Should have stopped it, he muttered. Too late to undo the damage. At Horizon's headquarters, Charles's assistant patched through a call from Ethan's legal counsel. "Mr. Bennett," the lawyer said, her voice crisp. "Mr. Carter demands an emergency board meeting tomorrow. As a major shareholder, he's invoking his rights to address discriminatory practices and leadership failures." Charles's stomach dropped. "We're handling it," he stammered, but the line went dead. His PR director burst in, holding a tablet. "Sir, we're hemorrhaging bookings. Customers are switching to Delta. We need a statement now." Charles watched the stock ticker plummet another 3%, each dip a blow to his legacy. He thought of his father's mantra: keep the planes flying, no matter what. But this wasn't a mechanical failure. It was a moral one. And Charles had ignored the warning signs for too long. Ethan, now joined by Mia in the lounge, reviewed the video frame by frame. "Look," Mia pointed out, pausing on Margaret's second bribe to Nathan. She said, "Standards matter." It's clear what she meant. Ethan's jaw clenched, but his voice stayed even. "It's not just her, it's the culture Horizon let fester." He called Olivia. "Liv, get the dossier ready. Every email, every complaint, every stat on their bias. We're not just calling a meeting, we're rewriting their future." Olivia, working from Novatech's Miami office, pulled up the evidence. Charles's emails dismissing diversity as costly fluff. Data showing black passengers faced 4x more random checks, and 12 whistleblower accounts from former employees. "This is airtight," she said. "But Ethan, this'll tank their stock further. You ready for the fallout?" "I'm ready," Ethan said, his voice a quiet thunder. He thought of his father's grave, the promise he'd made at 16. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. For Mia. For the passengers sharing their pain online. For a world that needed to change. Outside. Gate C9 was a circus. Reporters swarmed. Passengers chanted, "Fair skies now." And a small group held signs. "No bias in the air." The terminal screens flickered with breaking news. Horizon Airlines faces boycott as discrimination video goes viral. Ethan stepped to the lounge window, watching the chaos unfold. His phone buzzed, a text from Mia. "Just hit 15 million views." The stage was set, Plan Apex was rolling, and Horizon's reckoning was just beginning. The private lounge at Miami International Airport's Gate C9 had become Ethan Carter's war room. The hum of the terminal outside, reporters clamoring, passengers chanting, "Fair skies now," faded as Ethan stood before a video screen, his legal team's faces projected from Novatech's Miami office. Olivia Grant, his COO, held up a dossier thick with evidence, emails, whistleblower accounts, and data exposing Horizon's systemic bias. Ethan's tailored suit was unrumpled, his eyes steady, but inside, a fire burned, not just for the humiliation he'd endured in Seat 3A, but for every person who'd been made to feel less than human by Horizon's culture. As CEO of Novatech Solutions, he was ready to wield his power to force change. In Dallas, Horizon's headquarters was a hive of panic. The boardroom, with its mahogany table and floor-to-ceiling windows, felt more like a bunker as executives scrambled to contain the crisis. CEO Charles Bennett, his silver hair disheveled, stared at a monitor replaying the viral video, now at 15 million views, showing Samantha Reed's cold demand, Margaret Hayes's bribe, and Nathan Brooks's threats. The stock ticker on another screen bled red, down 20%. A $5 billion gut punch. Charles's phone buzzed with calls from investors, but he silenced it, his hands trembling. "We need Carter in a room," he told his CFO. "Now." Ethan's jet, arranged by Olivia, touched down in Dallas by noon. He strode into Horizon's headquarters, flanked by Olivia and General Counsel Lauren Hayes. No relation to Margaret. The boardroom doors swung open, and the air grew heavy. 12 board members, a mix of old guard executives and newer faces, sat rigid, their eyes darting between Ethan and the screen projecting the video. Charles stood at the head, his attempt at a welcoming smile faltering. "Mr. Carter," he began, voice strained. "We deeply regret." "Save it," Ethan cut in, his tone calm but razor sharp. He took the center of the room, Olivia setting up a projector. "This isn't about apologies. It's about accountability. Horizon didn't just fail me. It failed every passenger and employee it's marginalized for years." His words landed like blows, the board shifting uncomfortably. Olivia clicked the first slide, a chart showing black passengers faced 4 times more random security checks than white ones. "For 8 months, Ethan said. Novatech conducted a covert audit of Horizon's operations. We sent mystery shoppers, black, Latino, Asian, Muslim, all with identical first-class tickets. The results? Minority passengers were flagged, searched, or denied service at triple the rate of others. A board member, a woman in her 60s, leaned forward. "These are serious claims. Mr. Carter, where's the proof?" Ethan nodded to Olivia, who displayed the next slide, an email from Charles, dated 6 months prior. "Diversity initiatives are a distraction. Focus on profits, not politics." Gasps rippled through the room. Charles's face drained of color, his hands gripping the table. "That's out of context," he stammered. But Ethan pressed on. "Context?" Ethan said, his voice rising just enough to command silence. "Here's context. Your gate agents, like Samantha Reed, were trained to prioritize passengers like Margaret Hayes. Your supervisors, like Nathan Brooks, enforced policies targeting people like me. Your culture, Mr. Bennett, told your staff that black men don't belong in first class." Another slide. Testimony from a former Horizon flight attendant. "She was told to smile more for white passengers and demoted when she reported bias. She quit last year." The boardroom grew stifling, the weight of truth suffocating. A screen in the corner flashed. Horizon stock down 22% as boycott grows. Charles stepped forward, his voice desperate. "Mr. Carter, we can resolve this privately. There's no need for—" "No need for what?" Ethan interrupted, his gaze piercing. "For the world to know. It's too late. Your passengers are speaking. Your employees are speaking, and the market's listening." He pointed to the screen, where #Horizon Bias posts surged, including Mia Torres's video from Gate C9, now trending globally. A board member, Javier Ruiz, a Latino lawyer in his 50s, stood. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice steady, "we've just been notified of a class action lawsuit citing discriminatory practices, referencing your audit." The room erupted in murmurs. Charles swayed, clutching the table, his breath shallow. This can't," he gasped, his face graying. Ethan acted instantly. "Get a medic," he ordered, kneeling beside Charles. He loosened Charles's tie, his hands steady despite the chaos. It was a striking image, the man Horizon had humiliated, ensuring its CEO didn't collapse alone. Ethan's compassion wasn't for Charles. It was for the principle that no one, not even an adversary, should be abandoned in crisis. Paramedics rushed in, stabilizing Charles as they wheeled him out, His eyes met Ethan's, a flicker of shame passing between them. The board watched, stunned, the gravity of their failures sinking in. Javier took charge, his voice firm. "We need to act, now." Ethan stood, addressing the board. "Samantha Reed, Nathan Brooks, and Captain Daniel Foster must be terminated immediately. Their actions weren't isolated. They reflect your culture. Horizon will ground all flights for 72 hours, starting tomorrow, for mandatory anti-bias training designed by Novatech. Cost, $100 million. But the cost of doing nothing is your company's survival." A board member balked. 72 hours? We'll lose billions. You've already lost $5 billion, Ethan said, pointing to the ticker. This isn't negotiable. Novatech was evaluating a $75 million contract with you. That's on hold until I see real change. Javier nodded. We agree to the terminations and the grounding. Will you share your audit? I will, Ethan said, handing Olivia's dossier to Javier. But change isn't reports, it's action. Rebuild your culture, or I'll pull my investment. The threat hung heavy. Ethan's stake could tank Horizon if sold. Back at MIA, Samantha, Nathan, and Daniel were summoned to a sterile conference room. The HR director, flanked by security, played the viral video. Your employment is terminated, she said, sliding severance papers across the table. Samantha's hands shook, tears welling as she thought of Lily. Nathan's face hardened, but his eyes betrayed fear. Daniel closed his eyes, his career ending in disgrace. You targeted Ethan Carter, the HR director said. Novatech's CEO, our biggest shareholder. The revelation hit like a second blow, their world collapsing. Outside Gate C9, passengers cheered as news broke. Horizon suspends operations for anti-bias overhaul. Reporters swarmed, capturing the chance. Mia Torres, still at the terminal, posted an update. Justice is starting. Her video hit 20 million views. In the lounge, Ethan watched the news, his phone buzzing with support. Activists, lawmakers, strangers. Olivia sat beside him, her voice soft. You okay? Ethan exhaled, his mind on his father's grave, the promise he'd kept. Not yet, he said, but we're getting there. He thought of Mia, the passengers sharing their stories, the employees who'd face a new horizon. Plan Apex wasn't just about punishment, it was about progress. The boardroom emptied, Javier staying behind. We'll rebuild, he said, meeting Ethan's gaze. You have my word. Ethan nodded, but his eyes were steel. I'll hold you to it. As he left, the Dallas skyline loomed, a reminder of the work ahead. Horizon was grounded, but the fight for justice was taking flight. 3 months after the Gate C9 showdown at Miami International Airport, the aviation industry was still reeling. Horizon's 72-hour shutdown for anti-bias training, costing $100 million, had sent shockwaves far beyond its 35,000 employees. The viral video of Ethan's removal, now at 25 million views, had ignited a movement, with hashtag Horizon Bias fueling calls for reform across airlines. Ethan, as CEO of Novatech Solutions, stood at the center, his resolve unshaken despite the toll of leading a fight bigger than himself. Back in Miami, Ethan walked through MIA's Terminal C, his briefcase in hand, headed for a follow-up meeting in San Francisco. The once tense Gate C9 now felt different. New signs promised equal skies for all, and a mural of diverse faces adorned the wall. Horizon's training, designed by Novatech's AI-driven simulations, had confronted employees with their biases through real-world scenarios. Data showed progress. Complaints about discriminatory treatment dropped 60% in Horizon's first month post-training. But Ethan knew numbers weren't enough. True change lived in people's actions. In Dallas, Horizon's board, now led by Javier Ruiz after Charles Bennett's medical leave, was implementing Ethan's demands. New policies mandated transparent booking practices and a passenger bill of rights. The Department of Transportation, spurred by Ethan's audit, introduced federal rules requiring airlines to report treatment disparities by race and ethnicity. A first in U.S. history, Delta and JetBlue, fearing similar scrutiny, launched diversity councils, while American Airlines adopted Horizon's training model. The industry wasn't fixed, but Ethan's stand had cracked open a door long sealed shut. Samantha Reed, the flight attendant who'd demanded Ethan move, sat in a Miami community center, her hands clasped tightly. Fired from Horizon, she'd joined a Novatech-led reform program, confronting her role in the incident. As a single mother, she'd justified taking Margaret Hayes's bribes to cover her daughter Lily's medical bills. Now, she saw the cost of her silence. "I hurt someone," she told a group, her voice breaking. "I want Lily to know I'm trying to make it right." Samantha now worked with Horizon's task force, advocating for policies to protect employees from pressure to discriminate. Her journey was raw, imperfect, but real. Nathan Brooks, the ex-supervisor, had taken a job as a baggage handler at a regional carrier, a humbling fall from his Horizon role. His military mindset, order above all, had blinded him to Ethan's humanity. The viral video forced him to face his bias, and nights spent reading passengers' stories online chipped away at his defenses. At a Novatech training, he admitted, "I thought I was fair. I wasn't." He now mentored new hires, teaching them to question unfair directives, his gruff demeanor giving way to quiet accountability. Captain Daniel Sullivan, once Horizon's pilot, found purpose mentoring young aviators at a flight academy. At 55, his career had been defined by avoiding conflict, but his failure to stop Ethan's removal haunted him. "I trusted the wrong thing," he told a class, his weathered face somber. Hierarchy over heart. He worked with Ethan's team to develop ethics modules for pilots, ensuring future leaders wouldn't repeat his mistake. His redemption was a quiet vow to leave a better industry behind. Margaret Hayes, the passenger who'd bribed for Ethan's seat, faced a different fallout. Her real estate firm suspended her, and her name, branded Airline Karen online, became a cautionary tale. She retreated from public life, but a leaked email showed her donating to a civil rights group, a small step toward reckoning with her privilege. Ethan heard of it but felt no need to engage. His fight wasn't with individuals, it was with systems. In San Francisco, Ethan prepared for his keynote at the AI and Ethics Summit, where he'd unveil Novatech's $700 million platform to combat bias. The auditorium buzzed with tech leaders, but Ethan's mind was elsewhere, on his Oakland childhood, coding to escape poverty, and his father's grave, where he'd promised justice. The weight of leadership pressed on him, a quiet fatigue beneath his polished exterior. Olivia Grant, his COO, noticed, slipping him a note before he took the stage. "You're not alone." Ethan's speech was electric, weaving his Horizon experience into a call for systemic change. "Technology can expose bias," he said, "but only people can dismantle it." The audience rose, applauding, but Ethan's eyes scanned for the young faces, black, brown, Asian, knowing they'd carry the torch. Backstage, a Latina student approached, her voice shy. "I'm studying AI because of you," she said. Ethan smiled, his heart lifting. "Keep pushing," he told her. "The path's clearer now." At Horizon's Miami hub, employees gathered for a town hall. Javier Ruiz, the new CEO, credited Ethan's audit for exposing truths they'd ignored. "We're not just rebuilding," he said. "We're redefining." Horizon's stock had stabilized, but recovery would take years. Passengers noticed changes. Gate agents greeted everyone equally, and minority travelers reported fairer treatment. A black businessman at Gate C9 told a reporter, "It feels different now, like they see me." Ethan boarded a Horizon flight for New York, deliberately choosing the airline to test its progress. The crew, led by a black woman who'd once challenged Horizon's bias, welcomed him warmly. As he settled into his seat, not 3A, but one he'd chosen for the window view, Ethan glanced at his phone. A message from Mia Torres, the passenger who'd recorded the video, read, "You changed everything." He looked out at MIA's tarmac, the planes gleaming under the sun. The industry was shifting, but Ethan knew change was fragile. He thought of his mother, who'd told him, "Justice is a marathon, not a sprint." The fight wasn't over. Horizon, and others, would be held accountable. But for now, the ripples of Gate C9 were spreading, touching lives he'd never meet. Samantha, Nathan, and Daniel, each in their own way, were rebuilding, their stories proof that accountability could spark growth. Margaret's donation, though small, hinted at a crack in her armor. Horizon's new policies, backed by law, set a standard others couldn't ignore. Ethan's vision, a world where no one was told they didn't belong, was taking root, one hard-won step at a time. 9 months after the firestorm at Miami International Airport's Gate C9, Horizon Airlines soared again. Its first post-reform flight landing at Miami International Airport under a sky streaked with dawn's promise, the terminal. Once a battleground of bias, now pulsed with hope. Ethan, now 45, stood at Gate C9, his briefcase in hand, watching passengers board a Horizon jet bound for New York. As CEO of Novatech Solutions, he'd turned a personal injustice into a movement, reshaping an industry. Yet, as he prepared to board, his thoughts were on the future, on ensuring the change he'd fought for would endure. The gate area had transformed. Vibrant murals celebrated diversity. A quiet reflection room welcomed all faiths, and signs in Spanish, Creole, and Arabic promised equal treatment. Horizon's relaunch, after a $100 million, 72-hour grounding for Novatech's anti-bias training, had been a gamble that paid off. Passenger numbers climbed 15% above pre-crisis levels, and employee satisfaction hit record highs. The viral video of Ethan's removal, now at 30 million views, had faded from headlines. But its impact lingered, etched into policies and hearts. Ethan's influence stretched far beyond Horizon. The Department of Transportation's new rules, inspired by his audit, mandated bias reporting across airlines, forcing Delta, United, and others to overhaul their practices. JetBlue adopted Horizon's Passenger Bill of Rights. While American Airlines partnered with Novatech for training, the industry wasn't perfect. Change never is. But Ethan's stand had set a benchmark, a beacon for what fairness could look like at 3,000 feet. Samantha Reed, once the flight attendant who demanded Ethan move, now worked as a trainer for Horizon's reform program. Her journey from shame to redemption had been grueling. As a single mother, she'd taken Margaret Hayes's bribes to afford her daughter Lily's asthma treatments. Now, she taught employees to resist such pressures, her voice steady as she shared her story at a Miami training session. "I made a choice that hurt someone," she said, meeting trainees' eyes. "Don't let fear make your choices." Lily, now 11, sat in the back, her pride in her mother a quiet victory. Nathan Brooks, the former supervisor, had found a new path as a gate agent at a smaller carrier. His military rigidity had once fueled his bias, but the viral video and months of soul-searching cracked his defenses. At a Novatech workshop, he'd confessed, "I didn't see Ethan Carter as a person, just a problem." Now, he mentored young staff, urging them to challenge unfair orders. His transformation was slow, marked by late-night ex-posts reading passengers' stories. but it was real. A testament to accountability's power. Captain Daniel Sullivan, nearing retirement, had traded his pilot's wings for a role at a flight academy, teaching ethics to cadets. His failure to intervene at Gate C9 had cost him his career, but it awakened a deeper purpose. "I chose silence over courage," he told students, his voice heavy. "Don't make my mistake." He collaborated with Ethan's team, crafting scenarios that forced pilots to confront bias head-on. His work, though unglamorous, was his way of honoring the man he'd wronged. Margaret Hayes, the passenger who'd bribed for Ethan's seat, remained a shadow in the story. Her real estate firm had severed ties, and her Airline Karen moniker stuck online. Yet, a quiet act, a $1,000 donation to a racial justice nonprofit, hinted at introspection. Ethan learned of it through Javier Ruiz, Horizon's new CEO, but felt no need to reach out. His fight was systemic, not personal, and Margaret's reckoning was her own to navigate. In New York, Ethan was headed to a UN panel on corporate accountability. His $700 million AI platform, now a global model for equity, Novatech thrived, its mission woven into every line of code. But Ethan carried a quiet fatigue, the cost of leading a fight that never truly ended. He thought of his mother, who'd worked nights in Oakland to give him a chance, and his father, whose death at Ethan's 16th birthday had sparked his vow for justice. Their strength lived in him, a steady pulse beneath the weight of leadership. At Gate C9, Horizon's first relaunch flight was led by a diverse crew, including a black woman who'd once blown the whistle on bias. Passengers clapped as they boarded, a gesture of trust in a company reborn. Ethan watched, his expression calm but proud. Javier Ruiz, visiting Miami, approached. "We're holding the line," he said, his eyes earnest. "Your audit's our North Star." Ethan nodded, trusting Javier's commitment but knowing vigilance was eternal. As Ethan boarded, a young black boy, maybe 10, clutched a tablet showing Ethan's Forbes cover. "Is that you?" he asked, eyes wide. Ethan knelt, smiling. "That's me. What's your dream?" The boy grinned. "To build apps like you." Ethan ruffled his hair. "Then start now. The world needs you." The boy's mother, teary-eyed, mouthed, "Thank you." Ethan felt his mother's presence, her words echoing, "Clear the path for those coming after." The plane lifted off, Miami's skyline fading below. Ethan looked out, his mind on the work ahead. Horizon's policies, zero tolerance for bias, transparent audits, were law-backed now, but change was fragile. He'd hold the industry accountable, always. Because justice wasn't a destination, it was a journey. Samantha, Nathan, and Daniel, each rebuilding, showed redemption was possible. Margaret's donation, however small, suggested even the hardest hearts could shift. Horizon's transformation, stock recovering, passengers returning, proved systems could bend toward fairness. Ethan's New Dawn program, launched through Novatech, offered second chances to those like Samantha, pairing accountability with growth. Over 200 former employees had enrolled, their stories reshaping corporate culture nationwide. As the plane cruised, Ethan opened his laptop, drafting a memo for Novatech's next project, AI to predict bias in real time, ensuring no one faced what he had. Olivia Grant texted, "Panels sold out. You're changing the game." Ethan smiled, but his heart stayed with the boy at Gate C9, with Mia Torres, whose video had sparked it all, with every passenger who'd shared their pain. The fight wasn't over, but Ethan saw the roots of change, fragile, yet growing. His legacy wasn't in headlines or stock tickers, it was in the paths he'd cleared, the voices he'd amplified, the world he was building, one flight at a time. If this story moved you, have you seen change rise from injustice? Share your story below. hit follow for progress, and join us to build a fairer world. Let's keep pushing. Together, we'll make history, one step at a time.